The phone vibrated across the marble surface of Luca Moretti's desk at exactly 10:47 p.m. He didn't flinch. In his line of work, late-night calls were as common as breathing, and most of them carried the weight of decisions that would ripple through the city's underbelly like stones dropped into dark water. He let it ring twice before reaching for it, his movements deliberate, controlled. The number was unfamiliar, but that meant nothing. People found ways to reach him when they needed to. "Moretti," he answered, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command respect. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of distant sirens bleeding through the line. Then a voice, professional but strained. "Mr. Moretti, this is Officer Keene from the 12th Precinct. I'm calling regarding an incident on Brooklyn Avenue. A woman was involved in a motor vehicle accident approximately 30 minutes ago. Before she lost consciousness, she asked us to contact you." Luca's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his dark eyes. The city had taught him to expect anything, but this wasn't on the list. "Name?" "Nora Blake, sir. She's being transported to Mount Sinai, Brooklyn as we speak. The injuries don't appear life-threatening, but she was insistent about us reaching you before the ambulance left." The name hung in the air between them like smoke. Nora Blake. 2 years. It had been 2 years since he'd heard that name, since he'd seen those sharp green eyes across a table in a coffee shop that was too bright and too public for the kind of conversation they were having. She'd been a journalist then, one with enough guts to request an interview with a man most people only whispered about. Not for a crime piece, she'd said. For a profile. She wanted to know who Luca Moretti was when he wasn't being the shadow that moved markets and men. He'd agreed, because she'd asked without trembling, without the usual fear that preceded most interactions he had with civilians. She'd sat across from him with a recorder between them, and asked questions that made him reconsider answers he'd been giving himself for decades. Questions like whether power was worth the loneliness it demanded, whether he remembered what it felt like to trust someone, whether he slept well at night. The piece had run in a small but respected publication. It had been fair, uncomfortably perceptive, and it had painted him as something more complex than a villain or a hero. Just a man who'd made choices and lived with them. 2 weeks after publication, she'd disappeared from the journalism scene entirely. Rumors said she'd taken a position in public relations. He knew better. She'd left because publishing that article had put a target on her back, and she'd been smart enough to recognize it. Now she was in a hospital, and she'd called for him. Luca stood, buttoning his suit jacket with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to his ear with the other. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make sure she's not left alone until I arrive." "Sir, I'm not sure I have the authority to—" "You do now." He ended the call. The drive to Mount Sinai, Brooklyn took exactly 18 minutes. Luca's driver, Marco, knew better than to ask questions when his employer emerged from the penthouse with that particular expression, the one that suggested someone had crossed a line they didn't know existed. The city slid past the tinted windows in streaks of neon and shadow, familiar territory that Luca had spent 3 decades learning to navigate, to control, to own in ways that had nothing to do with property deeds. He thought about the last time he'd seen Nora. It had been brief, accidental, 6 months after the article. She'd been coming out of a bookstore in Greenwich Village, arms full of novels, hair longer than he remembered. She'd frozen when she saw him, and for a moment, he'd seen genuine fear in her eyes. Not of him, necessarily, but of what his presence in her life represented. He'd nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that carried both recognition and dismissal, then continued walking. She'd deserved her escape. He wasn't going to be the one to drag her back, but now she'd called for him. Why? Mount Sinai, Brooklyn's emergency entrance was a controlled chaos of ambulances, hurrying medical staff, and the low hum of urgent care being administered behind closed doors. Luca walked through it all like a knife through water, parting the disorder with his presence alone. Officer Keene was waiting near the reception desk, a young cop with tired eyes who straightened instinctively when Luca approached. "Mr. Moretti, she's in observation room 3. Doctor says she's stable, mild concussion, some bruising. They're keeping her overnight for monitoring." "The accident?" Keene pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. "Single vehicle collision. She swerved to avoid a motorcycle coming the wrong way down Brooklyn Avenue near the intersection with Bergen. Lost control, hit a parked car. The bike didn't stop. We're reviewing traffic cameras, but so far, nothing useful." Luca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A motorcycle, wrong way, no cameras. It was textbook. Clean enough to look accidental, messy enough to be dismissed as city traffic chaos. Someone had sent a message, and Nora had been lucky enough to survive the delivery. "The bike was deliberate," Luca said. "Not a question." Keene hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Off the record?" "Yeah, that's what I think too. But officially we're calling it reckless driving and failure to yield. Unless we get more evidence, that's where it stays." Luca nodded once. He didn't need the police to tell him what he already knew. He'd spent enough years watching people die in accidents that weren't accidents to recognize the pattern. What he needed to know was why. Why Nora? And why now? After 2 years of silence. He found her in observation room 3, behind a curtain that offered the illusion of privacy in a space designed for efficiency over comfort. She was awake, propped against thin pillows, her left arm wrapped in bandages, a small cut above her eyebrow held together with surgical glue. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, but her eyes, those sharp green eyes, still carried the same intelligence that had made her dangerous in the first place. She saw him standing in the doorway, and something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or resignation. "You came," she said, her voice rough but steady. "You asked," Luca replied, stepping into the room and letting the curtain fall closed behind him. They stared at each other across the small space, two people who'd shared one meaningful conversation years ago, and then deliberately stayed apart. The silence stretched, filled with questions neither of them knew how to ask yet. Finally, Nora broke it. "I know this is insane. I know you probably have 100 better things to do than show up at a hospital for someone you barely know. But when they asked if there was anyone they should call, your name was the only one I could think of that felt safe." Luca pulled the single chair closer to her bed and sat, his movements economical and controlled. "Safe is not a word people usually associate with me." "No," she agreed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "But honest is. You told me once that you never make promises you can't keep. That stayed with me." He studied her, noting the way her fingers twisted the thin hospital blanket, the slight tremor in her hands that had nothing to do with the accident. She was afraid, not of him, but of something else, something that had been haunting her long before a motorcycle forced her off the road. "Tell me what's happening, Nora. Start from the beginning." Nora took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the sterile white ceiling tiles, as if they contained the answers she was searching for. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but deliberate. Each word chosen with the care of someone who understood that what she was about to say would change everything. 3 weeks ago, I received an envelope at my apartment. No return address, no note. Just a USB drive. She paused, swallowing hard. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I haven't worked as an investigative journalist in 2 years, not since you interviewed me, Luca finished. Yeah. She met his gaze then, and he saw the guilt there, the weight of choices made in self-preservation. I took a job in corporate communications. Safe, boring, the kind of work that doesn't get you followed or threatened. I thought I'd left that world behind. But someone thought differently. She nodded. The drive contained files, documents mostly, financial records, email exchanges, photographs. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I started connecting the pieces. Her fingers found the edge of the bandage on her arm, picking at it nervously. It's a network. Politicians, developers, construction companies. They've been running a scheme for the last 8 years, skimming millions from public infrastructure projects. Bridges that never got fully repaired, schools that used substandard materials, subway stations that should have been renovated but weren't. The money that should have gone to making this city safer has been lining their pockets instead. Luca's expression remained neutral, but his mind was already working through the implications. This kind of corruption wasn't new. New York had been built on handshakes and backroom deals since its founding. But the scope she was describing suggested something bigger, more organized than the usual petty graft that greased the city's wheels. "Why send it to you?" he asked. "If you've been out of journalism for 2 years, there are active reporters who would have been more logical targets." That's what I couldn't figure out at first. Then I found it, buried in one of the subfolders, almost like it was placed there deliberately. An article I wrote 4 years ago, before I ever interviewed you. It was about waterfront development in Red Hook. How certain projects seemed to get fast-tracked through approval processes while others languished. I didn't have enough evidence to name names back then, but I had suspicions. She closed her eyes, remembering. One of the people I'd suspected, a city councilman named Richard Harding, is at the center of this network. And in the files someone sent me, there's proof. Irrefutable, prosecutable proof. Luca leaned back slightly, processing. So someone wants this exposed. Someone on the inside who either grew a conscience or is looking to eliminate competition. That's what I thought too. Except, she hesitated, and he saw real fear flash across her features. Except I also found something else in those files. Something I wasn't supposed to see. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Luca waited, patient as stone, giving her the space to continue at her own pace. He'd learned long ago that the most important information always came in these pauses, in the things people were afraid to say out loud. There were transfers, money moving through shell companies, offshore accounts. Most of it I couldn't trace, but there were a few transactions that had. Familiar patterns. She looked at him directly now, her gaze unflinching despite the tremor in her voice. Patterns I recognized from researching you 2 years ago. Not your money, I don't think, but accounts that orbit your world. Legitimate businesses that connect to your network. And there it was. The reason she'd called him. The real reason she was afraid. Whoever had sent her those files had inadvertently, or deliberately, included information that tangentially connected to Luca's operations. Not enough to implicate him directly, but enough to suggest that the corruption network she'd been given evidence of intersected with his world, in ways that made everything exponentially more dangerous. Luca stood, walking to the window that looked out over the hospital parking lot. Dawn was still hours away, but the city never truly slept. Even now, deals were being made, debts collected, territories defended. He'd spent his entire adult life building an empire based on understanding power dynamics, on knowing when to push and when to retreat. This situation required careful consideration. "Did you make copies?" he asked, his back still to her. "Yes. Cloud storage, password protected, and I told 2 people what I'd found. My sister, who lives in Portland, and an old editor I trust. Smart. She was smarter than most people gave her credit for. Certainly smarter than the people who'd tried to scare her off the road tonight. Creating a dead man's switch, ensuring that if something happened to her, the information wouldn't die with her. It was exactly what he would have done. The motorcycle wasn't random," he said, turning back to face her. "You know that. I suspected. but I wasn't sure until I saw your face when the officer told you about the accident." She managed a weak smile. "You have a tell, you know. When you're piecing together something dangerous, your jaw does this thing. I don't have tells. Everyone has tells. Yours are just more subtle than most." He almost smiled at that. Almost. Instead, he returned to the chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, bringing himself closer to her level. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay in this hospital tonight, under observation like the doctors ordered. Tomorrow you're going to check out and come with me to a place that's more secure than wherever you've been staying. You're not going back to your apartment, not going to your office, not going anywhere predictable until we understand the full scope of what you've stumbled into." "I'm not asking you to protect me," Nora said, but her protest lacked conviction. "You asked for me before the ambulance arrived. That was asking for protection, whether you want to call it that or not." His tone wasn't unkind, but it was absolute. "These people tried to kill you tonight with a warning that looked like an accident. Next time they won't bother with subtlety. And Nora, there will be a next time unless we figure out who's pulling the strings and convince them that touching you isn't worth the cost." She studied him for a long moment, her journalist instincts clearly warring with her common sense. "Why are you doing this? We spoke once, 2 years ago. I'm not your responsibility." It was a fair question, and one he'd been asking himself since getting the call. The easy answer was that he didn't like loose ends, that having a journalist with information that tangentially connected to his world getting killed would raise questions he didn't want asked. But that wasn't the whole truth, and he found himself uncomfortable with offering her anything less. 2 years ago, you asked me if I sleep well at night," he said finally. "Do you remember what I told you? You said you sleep fine because every decision you make is deliberate. That guilt requires regret, and you don't regret choosing survival. That's still true. But you also asked me something else, off the record, after the interview ended. You asked if there was anything I wished I could have done differently. One thing I'd change if I could." Nora's brow furrowed, trying to remember. "What did you say?" "I said I wished I'd been better at protecting the people who didn't ask to be involved in my world. The ones who got caught in the crossfire just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time." He held her gaze, letting her see the weight of that admission. "You wrote something dangerous 2 years ago because you were good at your job. You left that job because my world touched yours, and it scared you enough to walk away from what you loved. Now someone's trying to kill you, and while I didn't cause it directly, the edges of my world are close enough to what you found that I can't pretend I'm not involved. So this is guilt. This is responsibility. There's a difference." The curtain rustled, and a nurse poked her head in, her expression professional but pointed. "Mr. Moretti, visiting hours ended 2 hours ago. I've been giving you leeway, but Ms. Blake needs rest." Luca stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "I'll be outside. Officer Keene will remain at the door until morning. No one comes in without hospital ID, understood?" The nurse nodded, having clearly dealt with enough demanding family members to recognize when to pick her battles. As Luca moved toward the exit, Nora's voice stopped him. "Luca?" He turned back. "Thank you for coming, for all of this." He nodded once, a gesture that conveyed acknowledgement without sentimentality. Then he was gone, the curtain falling closed behind him. The leather chair in the hospital's waiting area wasn't designed for comfort, but Luca had learned to sleep in worse places. He didn't sleep now, though. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a series of calls, each one brief and coded in the language of business that anyone listening would interpret as mundane corporate matters. By 3 a.m., he had a clearer picture. Vincent, his head of security, had already pulled traffic camera footage from every intersection within a mile of the accident site. The motorcycle had appeared suddenly on Brooklyn Avenue. No plates, rider in full gear with a helmet that obscured any identifying features. It had shadowed Nora's car for 3 blocks before forcing the confrontation, then disappeared into an industrial area where cameras were conveniently non-functional. Professional work, the kind that required resources and planning. Tommy, who handled Luca's more delicate financial matters, had started tracing the shell companies Nora had mentioned. The patterns she'd recognized were indeed connected to Luca's network, but not directly. They were buffer companies, the kind used to clean money before it entered legitimate channels. Someone was using infrastructure similar to what Luca's organization employed, which meant either they'd copied his methods, or they'd learned them from someone who'd once worked for him. And Marco, his driver who was far more than just transportation, had reached out to contacts in the construction industry, the political sphere, and the parts of city government that actually ran things. Richard Harding, the councilman at the center of Nora's files, was well connected, but not untouchable. He'd been on the city council for 12 years, long enough to build power, but not so long that he'd become an institution. He had enemies, rivals, and a reputation for being just corrupt enough to be useful, but not so blatant that he drew federal attention. Until now, apparently. Luca synthesized the information with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent decades making life and death decisions based on incomplete data. The picture forming was complex, but not incomprehensible. Someone was trying to take down Harding's network, and they'd chosen Nora as their instrument, either because of her past work or because she was credible enough to make the evidence stick. The motorcycle incident meant that Harding's people had identified her as a threat, which suggested they had someone monitoring for exactly this kind of leak. But here was the interesting part. If they'd wanted her dead, she'd be dead. The accident was survivable, designed to scare rather than eliminate. That suggested either incompetence, which Luca doubted given the professional execution, or a warning. Someone on Harding's side wanted Nora to know she was vulnerable, to understand that going public with what she knew would have consequences. The question was whether that warning was meant for just her, or whether it was also meant for whoever had sent her the files in the first place. Dawn broke slowly over Brooklyn, the sky shifting from black to gray to the particular shade of urban blue that suggested the city was waking up whether it wanted to or not. Luca watched it through the waiting room windows, his mind already 3 steps ahead, planning contingencies and calculating risks. By the time Nora was cleared for discharge at 8 a.m., he had a plan. Officer Keene had been replaced by a day shift cop who looked less tired, but no less wary of Luca's presence. Luca ignored him, waiting while Nora signed paperwork and received discharge instructions that she clearly wasn't processing. When she finally emerged from behind the nurse's station, she'd changed from the hospital gown into the clothes she'd been wearing during the accident. Jeans, a sweater that had seen better days, sneakers that had a scuff mark from where her foot had hit the brake too hard. She looked exhausted, pale, and determined not to show it. "Ready?" he asked. "For what exactly?" "For disappearing, temporarily. I have a place in Tribeca. Secure building, doorman who knows how to be discreet, and enough distance from your normal life that anyone looking won't think to check there immediately. I can't just disappear. I have a job, responsibilities. You have a concussion and documentation of a car accident. Call your office. Tell them you need a few days for recovery. They'll understand." Nora opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. She was smart enough to know that he was right, that going back to her apartment or her office would be walking into whatever trap had been set for her next. Still, Luca could see the resistance in her body language, the way she held herself like someone preparing for a fight. "This isn't permanent," he said, softening his tone slightly. "Just until we understand what we're dealing with. A few days, maybe a week. And then what? Then we decide how to handle this in a way that keeps you alive and doesn't blow up both our lives." She considered this, her green eyes searching his face for something. Reassurance, maybe, or deception. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found enough of it, because she finally nodded. Okay, but I need to stop by my apartment first. Get clothes, my laptop, some things. Too risky. I have the files on my laptop, the full set. We're going to need them if we're going to figure this out. Luca's jaw tightened. There was that tell again, but he recognized the logic. Marco will take us. We go in, get what you need, and leave. No lingering, no stopping to tidy up. You have 10 minutes. Deal. The drive to Nora's apartment in Clinton Hill took 25 minutes through morning traffic. Marco kept checking the mirrors, watching for tails, while Luca sat in the back seat next to Nora, his phone a constant presence in his hand as he continued to coordinate with his people. The building where she lived was a pre-war walk-up, 4 stories, the kind of place that had probably been elegant in the 1920s and was now just holding on to respectability through good bones and rent control. "3rd floor," Nora said as they pulled up. "Apartment 3B. Marco parked directly in front, engine running. Luca got out first, scanning the street with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to recognize danger in the placement of a parked car or the posture of a person pretending to read a newspaper. Nothing immediately set off alarms, but that meant less than it used to in an age where surveillance was digital and threats could be activated with a phone call. They climbed the stairs quickly, Nora leading the way, despite the obvious discomfort from her bruised ribs. When they reached her door, she froze. "What?" Luca was beside her instantly, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon he wore concealed beneath his jacket. "The lock. I always deadbolt it. It's not deadbolted now." He gently moved her behind him, pressing her against the hallway wall. "Stay here. If someone's in there, then they're about to have a very bad morning." He tried the doorknob. Unlocked. Pushing it open slowly, he stepped into the apartment, every sense heightened. The space was small, but organized, the home of someone who valued order, or at least it had been. Now books were pulled from shelves, couch cushions overturned, the contents of drawers scattered across the floor. Someone had searched the place, and they hadn't been subtle about it. "Clear," he called back to Nora after checking the bedroom and bathroom. "But you need to see this." She entered, and he watched her face go through the predictable progression of emotions. Shock, violation, anger. They were looking for the files. Obviously. Did they find them? "No. I keep my laptop with me." She pulled her messenger bag closer, protective. "Always." Luca walked through the destruction, analyzing the pattern. The search had been thorough but not professional. A professional crew would have left things looking undisturbed. This was meant to send a message. "We know where you live. We can get to you anytime. Nowhere is safe. Get what you need. We're leaving." Nora moved through the apartment mechanically, grabbing clothes from her ransacked closet, toiletries from the bathroom, a few personal items that had somehow survived the search. She worked quickly, efficiently, someone who learned how to pack for unexpected departures. When she pulled a framed photograph from the wreckage of her nightstand, a picture of her with an older woman who shared her features, her hand trembled slightly. "Your mother?" Luca asked. "Sister, Sarah. She's the one I told about the files." Nora carefully placed the frame in her bag. "She lives in Portland. Do you think—" "Give me her information. I'll have someone keep an eye on her, make sure she's safe." "You can do that? From here?" "I can do a lot of things from anywhere." They were back in the car within 15 minutes, the Manhattan skyline growing larger through the windshield as Marco navigated traffic. Nora sat silently, processing everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Luca let her be, understanding that sometimes the mind needed quiet to catch up with the body. The building in Tribeca was exactly what he'd promised. Secure, anonymous, expensive in the way that money could buy privacy. The doorman recognized Luca immediately, greeting him with the kind of professional deference that suggested he was well compensated to forget faces. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was silent except for the mechanical hum of the cables. The apartment was modern, minimalist, impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Hudson River, furniture in shades of gray and white, art on the walls that was expensive, but emotionally neutral. It looked like a place where no one actually lived, which was accurate. Luca kept several properties like this around the city, safe houses for situations that required discretion. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, setting her bag on the leather couch. "Kitchen's stocked. There's a bedroom through there, bathrooms next to it. Security system is already active, and the building has cameras on every entry point." Nora walked to the windows, looking out at the river. "How long have you been prepared for something like this?" "I'm always prepared for something like this. The specifics change, but the principle stays the same. Have safe places, trusted people, and contingency plans." He loosened his tie, the first casual gesture she'd seen him make. "I'm going to make some calls, see what else we can learn about who's behind this. You should rest." "I can't rest. Not yet." She turned to face him. "I need to look at the files again, figure out exactly what we're dealing with." "Nora." "I know I look like I'm about to fall over, and maybe I am, but I'm also the one who spent the last 3 weeks living with this information. I know these files better than anyone. If we're going to find out who's trying to kill me and why, I need to be part of that conversation." He studied her for a moment, seeing past the bruises and exhaustion to the stubbornness beneath. It was the same quality that had made her a good journalist, the refusal to accept easy answers or convenient lies. It was also what was going to keep her alive, if she was lucky. "All right," he agreed, "but coffee first. Strong coffee." She managed a real smile then, tired but genuine. "Now that's the best offer I've had all day." The laptop sat open on the glass coffee table between them, its screen casting blue light across the darkening apartment. Luca had dimmed the overhead lights, claiming it was easier on the eyes, but Nora suspected he was more comfortable in shadows anyway. They'd been working for 3 hours straight. Cross-referencing the files she'd been sent with information Luca's people were feeding him in real time, building a map of connections that grew more complex with each passing minute. The coffee had been replaced by sandwiches that Luca had ordered delivered, then by more coffee. Nora's concussion was making her head throb with a steady, insistent pain, but she pushed through it, driven by the kind of focused energy that came from finally understanding the story you'd been chasing. "Here," she said, highlighting a series of transactions on the screen. "These payments all go through the same intermediary company, Riverside Development Solutions. On paper, they're a legitimate consulting firm that advises on urban renewal projects. But look at the timing. Every payment from the city to Riverside happens exactly 2 weeks before a corresponding payment from Riverside to one of these shell companies." Luca leaned closer, studying the pattern. Riverside receives contract payments from the city for consulting work that probably never happens, or is significantly overvalued. Then they filter that money through shells before it ends up in personal accounts. Classic laundering, just dressed up in development language. "Right, and Riverside's CEO is Michael Chen." Luca's expression darkened. "I know Chen. He used to work in legitimate development, made his money rebuilding properties in Queens after the housing crash. Then he started moving into more creative ventures. Creative meaning illegal? Creative meaning he learned that building things was harder than taking credit for other people's work." Luca pulled out his phone, typing a quick message. "If Chen's involved, this is bigger than just Harding and his council connections. Chen has relationships with people in my world, not my organization specifically, but adjacent to it. He's the kind of businessman who thinks having dinner with dangerous men makes him dangerous." Nora scrolled through more files, her fingers moving quickly across the trackpad. "So who sent me these files?" If this network includes people from your world, people who probably don't appreciate exposure, why risk leaking it? That's the question, isn't it? Lucas stood, walking to the windows. The sun was setting over the Hudson, painting the water in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if he'd been paying attention. Someone inside wants out, or wants someone else out. The information is too detailed, too specific to be an outside hack. Whoever compiled these files had access to internal communications, knew where the bodies were buried. A whistleblower, or someone positioning themselves to take over. In my experience, moral outrage is rarely the motivation for this kind of betrayal. It's usually ambition, or fear. He turned back to face her. Tommy's been tracing the shell companies on your list. 3 of them dead-end in the Caymans, standard practice. But 2 of them, the ones connected to Riverside, those trace back to a bank in Delaware that has some interesting clients. Interesting how? Interesting in that the bank's primary investor is a firm owned by Victor Castellano. The name hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. Nora's journalistic instincts immediately flagged it as significant, even though she wasn't sure why. Should I know that name? Probably not, unless you've spent time investigating organized crime families in New York. Victor's old guard, been in the game since the 80s. He's not flashy, doesn't make moves that draw attention, but he controls significant territory in the city's construction industry. Has his hands in unions, material suppliers, waste management, all the infrastructure that keeps buildings going up. So if you're running a scheme involving city construction contracts, you'd need Victor's permission, or at least his cooperation. Nothing moves in this city's construction world without someone like him knowing about it. Luca's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. Vincent just sent me something. The motorcycle that forced you off the road. They found it. Abandoned in a warehouse in Sunset Park, wiped clean. But the VIN traces back to a rental company that Victor's nephew owns. Nora felt her pulse quicken. So Victor's people tried to kill me? Or wanted it to look that way? Or were hired by someone else who wanted to point attention in Victor's direction? Luca rubbed his jaw, thinking, this is getting complicated. It was already complicated. No, it was dangerous. Now it's complicated, which is worse. Nora saved her work and closed the laptop, leaning back against the couch cushions. Her head was pounding, and the adrenaline that had been keeping her alert was starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. So what do we do? If this connects to organized crime families, we can't just go to the police. The files might be evidence of corruption, but they're also evidence that could get a lot of powerful people arrested, including people who won't hesitate to kill to protect themselves. We need leverage, Luca said, returning to sit across from her. Right now, whoever sent you these files has all the power. They choose what you see, when you see it, how you interpret it. We need to flip that equation. How? By finding out who sent it and why. Once we know their endgame, we can decide whether to help them, stop them, or find a third option that keeps you alive and doesn't start a war. Nora studied him in the fading light. This man who'd walked into her life 2 years ago and then walked out just as deliberately, only to return when she needed him most. There was something both terrifying and reassuring about his presence. The way he treated violence as a business problem, threat assessment as a casual conversation. She'd spent 2 years trying to forget that this world existed, trying to convince herself that she belonged in the safe, boring realm of corporate communications. But she'd never quite managed it, had she? Part of her had always missed the dangerous questions, the stories that mattered even when they scared her. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "You can always ask. I'll decide whether to answer. Why did you really agree to that interview 2 years ago? Men in your position don't usually sit down with journalists, especially not for profile pieces that might make them look human." Luca was quiet for a long moment. and Nora thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Do you remember what you said in your email when you requested the interview? Most reporters lead with their credentials, their platform, why I should care about giving them access. You didn't do any of that. You said, 'I'd like to understand how someone builds a life in the shadows while the rest of us try to find light.' But that's what you wanted to know, not the criminal details, not the sensational story. You wanted to understand the choice. And did I? Better than most. You wrote that I'd created a kingdom of careful compromises, that I'd traded the possibility of trust for the certainty of control. You weren't wrong. But you weren't entirely honest with me either." "No," he admitted. "I wasn't. There are things about my life, my past, my organization that I'll never tell anyone. Not because of legal exposure, but because some truths are too heavy to share. They'd break you, and I liked you too much to do that." The admission was casual, almost throwaway, but Nora heard the weight beneath it. "You liked me. I respected you. There's a difference. Is there?" "Yes. I like plenty of people I don't respect. I respect very few people I actually like. You were an exception." Nora's phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out, expecting another spam call or automated message. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "The files I sent you were meant to help. Stop investigating, stop asking questions, or you'll find out there are worse things than car accidents. Consider this your final warning." She showed the screen to Luca, watching his expression shift from neutral to dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. He took the phone from her hand, examining the number, then forwarded the message to someone before handing it back. "They're tracking you," he said simply. "They know you're not at your apartment, which means they're either monitoring your phone or they have someone watching you. Can't you trace it? Tommy's already on it, but it'll be a burner. They're not stupid." He stood, walking to what appeared to be a closet, but turned out to house the apartment's security system. Within seconds, he'd pulled up camera feeds from the building's entrances, scanning for anyone who looked out of place. "The building's clean. No one followed us here, and no one's been loitering outside. But that message came within 15 minutes of us accessing those files on your laptop. You think the laptop's compromised? Or your phone, or both. Doesn't matter. We were careful, but clearly not careful enough." He pulled out his own phone, making another call. "Vincent, I need a clean device delivered to the Tribeca location. Also need a tech team to sweep for surveillance software, both within the hour." When he hung up, Nora asked the question she'd been avoiding. "Who are we fighting, Luca? Is it Harding's people? Victor Castellano? Someone else entirely?" "That's what we're going to find out. But right now, we need to assume everyone's a threat, and no one's an ally." He returned to the couch, sitting closer to her this time, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "I know this isn't what you signed up for when you answered that call tonight. But you're in it now, whether you want to be or not. The question is whether you trust me enough to let me handle this my way." "Which is?" "Aggressive, direct, probably illegal by most conventional standards." His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her understand why men feared him and why he'd risen to power in a world where weakness was fatal. "I don't play defense, Nora. I don't wait for threats to materialize and then react. If someone wants you dead, I find out who they are and I make sure they regret making that decision. But doing it my way means you have to trust that I know what I'm doing, even when it looks like I'm making things worse." She should have been terrified. 2 days ago, she would have been. But sitting in this expensive anonymous apartment with a man who'd built his life on violence and control, Nora found herself strangely calm. Maybe it was the concussion, or maybe it was the understanding that she'd already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd called him instead of a friend, instead of her family. She'd known, somewhere deep down, that what she needed wasn't comfort or sympathy. She needed someone who understood power and how to wield it. Okay, she said finally. We do it your way. You're sure? No, but I'm also not going back to pretending I can live a safe, quiet life, while people who do bad things control the narrative. I became a journalist because I wanted to tell true stories, stories that mattered. I've been running from that for 2 years. Maybe it's time I stopped. Luca nodded, and something in his expression shifted. Respect, maybe, or recognition of someone who'd finally decided to stop lying to themselves. Then we start tomorrow. Tonight you rest. Doctor's orders, remember? What about you? I'm going to make some calls, talk to people who might know more about Victor's recent business dealings. If he's involved in this corruption network, someone in my circles will have heard rumors. And if they haven't, then we'll take a more direct approach to finding answers. Nora didn't ask what that meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know yet. The bedroom was dark and quiet, the kind of manufactured silence that came from being 15 floors above street level with triple-paned windows that blocked out the city's constant hum. Nora lay on the bed, still fully clothed, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince her body to rest. Her head ached with a steady, insistent rhythm that the painkillers had only partially dulled, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the motorcycle coming toward her, felt the sickening lurch of losing control. She'd almost died. The thought kept circling back, undeniable and terrifying. If she'd been going faster, if the car she'd hit had been a tree instead of a parked sedan, if she hadn't instinctively turned the wheel at just the right moment. There were a dozen ways that accident could have ended with her in a morgue, instead of this expensive safe house. Through the door, she could hear Luca's voice, low and measured, speaking in Italian to someone on the phone. She didn't understand the language, but she understood the tone. Authority, command, the kind of voice that expected obedience and usually got it. It should have frightened her. Instead, it was oddly comforting, the oral evidence that someone was actively working to keep her alive. Eventually, exhaustion won out over anxiety, and she drifted into a thin, restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams of documents catching fire, numbers that wouldn't stay still long enough to read, and Luca's face asking her questions she couldn't answer. She woke to pre-dawn light filtering through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was, why her body ached like she'd been hit by a truck. Then it all came rushing back. The accident, the hospital, the ransacked apartment, the threatening text message. Nora sat up slowly, her ribs protesting the movement. The bedroom door was cracked open, and through it, she could see Luca sitting at the dining table, his suit jacket draped over the chair beside him, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was working on his own laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's glow, and even from this distance, she could see the tattoos that wound up his forearms, intricate patterns that probably had meanings she'd never understand. She'd noticed them during the interview 2 years ago, had asked about them. He'd given her a non-answer, something about personal history, and she'd been smart enough not to push. Now, watching him work in the early morning light, she wondered about all the questions she hadn't asked, all the stories written in ink and scars that he kept hidden beneath expensive clothes and careful control. "You're awake," he said without looking up. "There's coffee in the kitchen, fresh, made it 10 minutes ago." Nora padded out in bare feet, finding a mug already set out beside the coffee maker. The coffee was strong and black, exactly what she needed. She poured a cup and returned to the living room, settling into the chair across from him. "What time is it?" she asked. 6:30. "Vincent's team swept your devices last night while you were sleeping. You're right about the laptop being compromised. Someone installed a keystroke logger that's been transmitting everything you type to an external server. Your phone's clean, but they recommended replacing it anyway." Nora's stomach sank. So whoever's behind this knows everything I've accessed, every search I've run, Every file I've opened. For the last 3 weeks, yes. Which is actually helpful. How is that possibly helpful? Because now we know what they know, and we can use that. He finally looked up from his screen, and she saw that he'd been awake all night. There were shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that suggested he was running on coffee and willpower. I spent the night mapping the timeline of your investigation against external events. Every time you opened a specific file, something happened in the real world. When you first accessed the files about Victor Castellano, one of his legitimate construction businesses suddenly announced a major contract. When you spent 3 hours reading emails about Richard Harding, Harding made an unscheduled trip to Albany to meet with state officials. They were reacting to what I was learning. More than that, they were trying to stay ahead of it, which tells us that whoever's monitoring you isn't just interested in stopping you. They're using your investigation as an early warning system for their own purposes. Nora processed this, her journalist's mind immediately seeing the implications. So the person who sent me the files and the person monitoring my research might not be the same person. Exactly. We have at least 3 players in this game, whoever leaked the information, whoever's trying to keep it buried, and possibly a third party who's using the chaos to advance their own agenda. Luca turned his laptop around so she could see the screen. It displayed a complex network diagram, names and companies connected by different colored lines. This is what I've mapped so far. Red lines are confirmed financial connections. Blue lines are political relationships. Green lines are suspected criminal ties. The diagram was dizzying in its complexity. Richard Harding sat near the center, connected to a dozen different entities. Michael Chen and Riverside Development had their own cluster of connections. Victor Castellano was there too, his name linked to so many other nodes that it looked like a spider at the center of a web. But what caught Nora's attention was another name, one she recognized from the files, but hadn't thought much about until now. Elizabeth Strand. Who's Strand? She asked, pointing to the screen. Deputy Mayor for Development and Housing. She's been in that position for 6 years, longer than anyone expected her to last. Generally considered competent, occasionally accused of being too cozy with developers, but nothing that's ever stuck. She's in my files, not prominently, but she's copied on a lot of the email exchanges between city officials and Riverside. I know. I saw that last night. Luca zoomed in on Strand's section of the diagram. What's interesting is what's not in your files. Strand has connections to Victor Castellano that go back 15 years, from before either of them was particularly powerful. They served together on a nonprofit board for urban development, did some legitimate work together on affordable housing initiatives. Legitimate? As far as I can tell, yes. Which makes her either very clean or very good at hiding the dirt. He closed the laptop, leaning back in his chair. I have a theory, but you're not going to like it. I haven't liked anything about this situation so far. Try me. What if Strand sent you the files? Nora nearly spit out her coffee. The deputy mayor? Why would she expose her own corruption network? Because maybe it's not her network. Maybe she's been watching Harding and Chen and the others operate for years, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to burn it all down. Luca stood, walking to the windows. The sun was rising over Manhattan now, turning the glass towers into spires of gold and fire. Politicians at her level don't last by being passive. They last by being strategic, by knowing when to make moves that eliminate rivals and consolidate power. If Strand wants to move up, and everyone at her level wants to move up, she needs to clear the field. Taking down a corruption network that she was never officially part of would make her a hero. It would also eliminate potential obstacles to her advancement. But if she sent the files, why would her people try to kill me? Why monitor my investigation? Maybe they're not her people. Maybe Harding's side figured out what was happening and decided to send you a warning before things got too far. Or maybe... He paused, considering. Maybe Strand sent the files but didn't expect you to dig as deep as you did. She gave you enough to damage Harding, but you found more. You found the connections to Victor, the money laundering infrastructure, the full scope of the operation. That's more than she wanted exposed, because it implicates her by association, even if she was never actively involved. Nora's mind raced, fitting pieces together in new configurations. So the warning wasn't, "Stop investigating the corruption." It was, "Stop investigating beyond what I wanted you to find." That's my theory. But it's only a theory until we confirm it. How do we do that? By setting a trap. We make Strand think you're going to publish everything you found, every connection, every name, every transaction. We put pressure on her to either commit to protecting you, which would confirm she's not behind the threats, or to escalate against you, which would confirm she is. And if she escalates, then I deal with it. The casual way he said it, as if dealing with a deputy mayor who might want her dead was just another item on his morning to-do list, should have been absurd. But Nora was starting to understand that in Luca's world, threats were just problems with specific solutions. He'd spent decades in an environment where hesitation meant death and half measures meant weakness. He didn't think about danger the way normal people did. He calculated risk, assessed resources, and acted with the certainty of someone who'd survived by making the hard choices before anyone else even recognized the choice existed. "Okay," she said. "What's the plan?" "You write an article. A real one. Well-researched, documented, naming names. Everything you found in those files plus everything we've discovered since. But you don't publish it. You send it to Strand first, along with a message that you're giving her 48 hours to comment before it goes public. That's suicide. The moment she knows I have everything documented, she has to make a choice. Either she works with us to control the narrative, or she tries to stop us. Either way, we'll know who we're really fighting. And what about Victor Castellano? If his name is in that article, he's not going to wait 48 hours to respond. Victor's not going to see the article. We're going to make sure of that." Luca's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. Tommy just confirmed something I suspected. The shell company that received the largest payments from Riverside? It's owned by a holding company that's owned by another holding company that eventually traces back to an entity registered in Elizabeth Strand's maiden name. She's not just covering for the corruption, she's been profiting from it. So she's dirty after all. Everyone's dirty, Nora. The question is whether they're dirty enough to kill for it. He met her eyes, and she saw the seriousness there, the weight of what he was about to say. If we do this, there's no going back. Once we start pushing, people are going to push back, and they're going to push hard. You need to be absolutely certain you want to go down this road, because I can't promise you'll come out the other side the same person you are now. Nora thought about the last 2 years, the safe job she'd taken, the stories she'd stopped telling, the part of herself she'd buried because being brave had gotten too dangerous. She thought about her ransacked apartment, the threatening text message, the fear that had been her constant companion since opening those files. But she also thought about why she'd become a journalist in the first place, the belief that truth mattered, that exposure could be a weapon against the powerful, that someone had to be willing to tell the stories everyone else was too afraid to touch. "I'm certain," she said. "Let's do it." Luca nodded, and for the first time since she'd woken in the hospital and seen him standing at her door, he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, or a reassuring one. It was the smile of a predator who'd just committed to the hunt. Then we start writing. The article took 12 hours to write, edit, and document. Nora worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew that every word mattered, that this wasn't just journalism, it was a weapon being carefully forged. Luca sat beside her for most of it, offering suggestions that revealed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of how to construct a narrative that was both legally defensible and maximally damaging. "You're good at this," she said at one point, watching him restructure a paragraph to strengthen its impact while removing anything that could be construed as speculation. I've spent my life understanding how information moves, how it wounds, how it kills. This isn't that different from what I do normally, just using words instead of other tools. By 8 p.m. they had a draft. It was devastating. 23 pages documenting the corruption network in meticulous detail, with financial records, email exchanges, and photographic evidence supporting every claim. It named Richard Harding, Michael Chen, and 6 other city officials as central players in a scheme that had diverted over $40 million from public infrastructure projects. It detailed how Riverside Development Solutions had operated as a money laundering front, how shell companies had been used to obscure the true recipients of city contracts, and how political favors had been traded for cash payments disguised as consulting fees. And at the very end, almost as an afterthought, it mentioned Elizabeth Strand, not as a participant, but as someone whose office had been copied on numerous email exchanges and whose financial disclosure forms showed connections to entities that had received contract payments. The implication was clear without being explicit. Strand had either been complicit through inaction or had benefited directly from the scheme. "It's perfect," Luca said, reading the final version. "It gives her room to position herself as ignorant or as a victim, but it also puts enough pressure on her that staying silent isn't an option. And if she goes to the police with this, then we have a very interesting problem, because the police would have to explain why they're suddenly interested in corruption they've ignored for 8 years. No, Strand's not going to the police. She's going to do exactly what we want her to do. She's going to reach out directly to try to control the situation." They sent the article at 9 p.m., addressed to Elizabeth Strand's personal email address that Tommy had acquired through methods Nora decided not to ask about. The message was simple. "Deputy Mayor Strand, I believe you'll recognize some of the information in the attached document. I'm planning to publish this story in 48 hours, but as a courtesy, I'm giving you the opportunity to provide comment or context before publication. I can be reached at this email address. Nora Blake." "Now we wait," Luca said, closing the laptop. They didn't have to wait long. 23 minutes later, Nora's new phone, the clean one Vincent's team had provided, rang with an unknown number. She looked at Luca, who nodded. She answered on speaker. "Ms. Blake?" The voice was female, controlled, professional. "This is Elizabeth Strand. I received your email. Deputy Mayor, thank you for calling. Let's skip the pleasantries. You've been given information that's partially accurate, but dangerously incomplete. Publishing what you sent me would damage innocent people and serve the interests of those who leaked these documents to you. So you know who leaked them?" A pause. "I have suspicions. Care to share?" "Not over the phone. I'd like to meet with you. Tomorrow morning, somewhere public. You can bring anyone you want as security. I'm not interested in threatening you, Ms. Blake. I'm interested in making sure you understand what you're actually walking into." Nora looked at Luca, who was already pulling up something on his phone. He typed a message, showed it to her. Agree, but name the location. "All right," Nora said. "Tomorrow morning at 10, the lobby of the New York Public Library. Main branch, 5th Avenue. Public enough for you?" "It has to be." "Fair enough. I'll see you then, Ms. Blake." "And Ms. Blake, I hope you're working with someone you trust, because the people you're investigating don't have the luxury of conscience that you and I do." The line went dead. "She knows you're not alone," Nora said. "She'd be stupid not to assume it. The question is whether she knows it's me specifically." Luca stood, stretching muscles that had been still for too long. "But it doesn't matter. We have a meeting, which means we have her attention. Now we need to decide what we want from her. I want the truth. I want to know who sent me those files and why. You want the truth. I want to make sure whoever tried to kill you understands that trying again would be very expensive for them. Those aren't necessarily the same goal. So what do? We go to the meeting. We listen to what she has to say. And then we decide whether she's someone we can work with or someone we need to expose. He turned to face her fully. But Nora, you need to understand something. Once we sit down with Strand, we're committing to a specific path. Either we make a deal that keeps you alive but might mean compromising on what gets published, or we burn everything down and accept the consequences. There's no middle ground in situations like this. I'm not compromising the story. Even if it means putting yourself at greater risk? Even then. He studied her for a long moment, and she couldn't quite read what she saw in his expression. You're braver than I gave you credit for. Or more stupid. There's often not much difference. That night, Nora actually slept. Exhaustion finally overwhelming anxiety. When she woke at 7 a.m., Luca was already awake, sitting at the dining table with coffee, and what looked like a full security briefing spread across his laptop. He'd changed clothes at some point. Different suit, still expensive, still perfectly tailored to hide the weapon she now knew he carried. Vincent will be with us today, he said, when she emerged from the bedroom. He'll stay back, out of sight, but close enough to intervene if things go wrong. Marco will drive us, and I've arranged for 2 additional people to be in the library itself, positioned where they can watch the entrances. Is all this really necessary? It's necessary until it isn't. I don't take chances with people I'm responsible for. I'm not your responsibility. You called for me before the ambulance arrived. That made you my responsibility. There was no arguing with that logic, mainly because he said it with such absolute certainty that debate seemed pointless. They had breakfast, bagels and more coffee, and went over what they knew one more time, making sure they had all the details memorized. Luca insisted she leave her phone and laptop behind. They'd take only the printed copy of the article and go in as clean as possible. The drive to the library was quiet, Manhattan morning traffic providing white noise that filled the silence. Nora watched the city scroll past the windows, thinking about how different everything looked now compared to just 3 days ago. 3 days since the accident. 3 days since her life had been threatened. Her apartment ransacked. Her careful bubble of safety definitively burst. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm. The way she imagined soldiers must feel right before walking into combat. Not unafraid, but accepting of the fear, channeling it into focus. The New York Public Library's main branch was exactly what Nora had hoped for. Crowded, public, full of tourists and students, and people who had no idea they were about to witness a meeting between a journalist, a crime boss, and a deputy mayor conspiring about corruption. They arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a table near the main reading room, where they had clear sightlines to all entrances. Elizabeth Strand arrived exactly at 10 a.m., walking in with the confidence of someone who owned whatever space she occupied. She was in her early 50s, expensively dressed but not ostentatiously so, with the kind of professional appearance that made you think competent before you thought anything else. She saw them immediately, registering Luca's presence with a slight widening of her eyes before her expression returned to neutral. "Ms. Blake," she said, extending her hand. "And Mr. Moretti, I should have guessed you'd be involved in this." "Deputy Mayor." Luca didn't stand, didn't offer to shake her hand, just gestured to the chair across from them. "You wanted to talk. We're listening." Strand sat, placing her own phone face down on the table, a gesture of good faith that probably meant nothing. "Let me be direct. The files you received, Ms. Blake, were sent to you by someone within my own office. A junior aide named Marcus Chen, Michael Chen's nephew. He's been compiling evidence for months, but not out of any moral conviction. He's being blackmailed by someone we haven't identified yet. Someone who wants to use your article to trigger a cascade of investigations that would benefit them politically or financially. So you're saying everything in those files is true, but I'm being manipulated?" Nora kept her voice level, journalistic. I'm saying the truth is complicated. Yes, there's been corruption. Yes, Harding and Chen and others have been stealing from the city. But I haven't been part of it. I've been documenting it, building my own case, waiting for the right moment to bring it to federal investigators who could actually do something about it. Your article, published now, would alert everyone involved and give them time to destroy evidence and disappear. It would also destroy my investigation. Why should I believe you? Because I can prove it. Strand pulled out a USB drive, setting it on the table. This contains evidence I've been gathering for 3 years. Recordings of conversations, original documents, witness statements. It's more comprehensive than what you have, and it's all admissible in court. I can give it to you, let you verify everything I'm saying. But I need you to hold your story for 2 months. That's when the federal investigation will be ready to move, when arrests can be made that will actually stick. Luca leaned forward slightly, and Nora saw Strand tense in response, an instinctive reaction to proximity to danger. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I get to be the deputy mayor who exposed corruption instead of the one who was suspected of enabling it. I get to advance my career without this hanging over me. And I get to make sure the people who are actually guilty go to prison instead of just getting slapped with fines and walking away. What about Marcus Chen, the nephew? He'll be arrested along with his uncle. The blackmail won't save him from participating in the cover-up. Strand's expression was hard. I don't protect traitors, Mr. Moretti. I thought you'd appreciate that. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, sizing each other up. Nora could feel the tension, the unspoken calculations happening beneath the surface of polite conversation. This was a negotiation, but not just about information. It was about power, about who controlled the narrative, about who would win and who would lose when everything came crashing down. I need to verify what's on that drive, Nora said finally. And I need to talk to some of my sources, make sure what you're telling me matches what they know. You have 48 hours. After that, I need your answer. Strand stood, leaving the USB drive on the table. Ms. Blake, I hope you understand that I'm trying to help you. Publishing now would make you a target for everyone involved in this scheme, not just the people who've already tried to hurt you. Waiting gives you protection, federal protection, if necessary. Or it gives you time to clean up loose ends. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. The statement was delivered without malice, just fact. Mr. Moretti understands how this works. Sometimes the best way to stay alive is knowing when to be patient. She left without another word, disappearing into the crowd of library patrons. Nora picked up the USB drive, turning it over in her fingers. What do you think? I think she's telling part of the truth, maybe even most of it. Luca stood, scanning the room automatically before gesturing for her to follow. But I also think she's playing her own game, and we won't know all the rules until we're too far in to back out. They returned to the Tribeca apartment, where Luca had Tommy analyze the USB drive for malware before they opened any files. It was clean, surprisingly so, and contained exactly what Strand had promised. Years of carefully compiled evidence, witness statements, recorded conversations. It was the kind of documentation that could bring down not just Harding's network, but 6 other corrupt operations across the city. She's been building a case, Nora said, reading through the files with growing amazement. Not just against Harding, but against everyone. This is incredible. It's also dangerous. If this information exists, people will kill to keep it from becoming public. Luca was reading over her shoulder, his expression thoughtful. She's offering to let you break this story when the time comes. That's not a small thing. So you think we should trust her? I think we should verify everything she gave us, cross-reference it with what we already know, and then make a decision based on evidence, rather than hope. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the solid presence that had become oddly comforting. But Nora, I also think you need to accept that whatever you decide, you're going to make enemies. Powerful ones. People who won't forget that you cost them money and freedom and power. I know. Do you? Because understanding it intellectually and living with it are different things. I can protect you from immediate threats, but I can't protect you from the long-term consequences of burning down people's lives. That's a burden you'll carry forever. She turned to look at him, really look at him, seeing past the expensive suits and controlled demeanor to the man underneath. Is that what you carry? The weight of all the decisions you've made, all the people you've hurt? Every day. And you still sleep well at night? Most nights. But there are some I don't. His dark eyes held hers. You asked me once if I had regrets. I said I didn't, and that was true at the time. But you made me think about it differently. You made me wonder what kind of man I'd be if I'd made different choices. And I'd probably be dead. The world I operate in doesn't reward conscience. It rewards strength, certainty, the willingness to do what others won't. But meeting you reminded me that there are people who choose differently, who have the courage to be vulnerable in a way I never could be. That's worth something. Maybe worth more than what I've built. Nora felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of the moment they were sharing. This wasn't about the investigation anymore, or about the threats against her life. This was about two people who'd collided accidentally 2 years ago, and then deliberately avoided each other, both understanding that whatever existed between them was too complicated to examine closely. Now, forced together by circumstances, they couldn't avoid it anymore. Luca. Her phone buzzed, another message from an unknown number. Enjoyed watching you at the library. Strand's lying to you. The federal investigation doesn't exist. She's trying to buy time to eliminate evidence and witnesses. Publish now, or she'll make sure you never publish anything again. Attached was a photograph. Elizabeth Strand, taken from a distance, meeting with someone Nora didn't recognize in what looked like a parking garage. Luca took the phone, examining the image closely. Tommy, I need facial recognition on this person. Send it encrypted. He looked at Nora. This changes things. Who's sending these messages? If it's Marcus Chen, it's not Chen. Chen's being blackmailed, remember? He's not the mastermind, just the source. Someone else is orchestrating this, using both you and Strand as pieces on a board we can't fully see yet. The phone buzzed again. Tommy's response came fast. The person in the photograph was Victor Castellano's lawyer. Nora felt cold. Why would Strand be meeting with Castellano's lawyer? Either she's dirtier than she claimed, or... Luca paused, thinking. Or she's trying to make a deal. Cut Victor in on whatever arrangement she's setting up with the federal government. Immunity for testimony, maybe. Or reduced charges. Or she's working with him to make sure the investigation never happens. That too. They sat in silence, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on both of them. Every piece of information seemed to contradict the last. Every potential ally revealed as potentially an enemy. Nora felt exhaustion creeping in again, the concussion still affecting her more than she wanted to admit. What do we do? She asked quietly. Luca stood, walking to the windows again. It was late afternoon now, the sun starting its descent toward New Jersey. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We stop trying to figure out who to trust and start assuming everyone's lying. We verify everything, believe nothing, and make our decisions based solely on what we can prove. And then we publish the truth, all of it. Regardless of what deals people are trying to make behind the scenes. We let the chips fall and deal with whoever comes after us. He turned back to her. But fair warning. If we do this, If we really commit to exposing everything and everyone, it's going to get violent. Not immediately, maybe, but eventually. People with this much to lose don't accept defeat gracefully. Nora thought about the last 3 days, about everything that had happened since that phone call in the hospital. She thought about the life she'd been living for the last 2 years, safe and small, and ultimately meaningless. She thought about why she'd become a journalist, about the belief that truth mattered even when it was dangerous to tell. "Then I guess it's time to stop being safe," she said. Luca smiled that predator's smile again. "Now you're talking like someone who might actually survive this." They worked through the night, verifying every piece of information from Strand's USB drive, cross-referencing it with the original files, building a complete picture of the corruption network. By dawn, they had something unprecedented. A fully documented, legally bulletproof exposé that implicated dozens of people across multiple levels of New York's government and business infrastructure. It was the story of a lifetime. It was also a declaration of war. At 6 a.m., Nora sent the article to 3 major publications simultaneously, along with all supporting documentation. She'd written a note explaining that she was publishing despite pressure to delay, that she believed the public deserved to know immediately what their officials had been doing with their money and their trust. Then she and Luca waited for the world to explode. It took 4 hours. By 10 a.m., news sites were running the story. By noon, officials were resigning. By 2 p.m., federal prosecutors were announcing investigations. By evening, Richard Harding had been arrested. Michael Chen was fleeing the country, and Elizabeth Strand was holding a press conference claiming she'd been building her own investigation all along. Nora watched it all from the Tribeca apartment, Luca beside her, both of them understanding that this was only the beginning. The story had broken, but the consequences would take years to fully unfold. "Thank you," she said quietly, as the sun set over Manhattan one more time. "For everything. For coming to the hospital. For keeping me alive. For helping me finish what I started." "You called for me," Luca replied, the same words he'd said 3 days ago in that hospital room. "That made it my responsibility." "Is that all it was? Responsibility?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No, it wasn't." She turned to face him, and there in the fading light, surrounded by the fallout of the story they'd just unleashed on the city, Nora Blake and Luca Moretti finally stopped pretending that the connection between them was anything simple or safe or easily explained. Some debts, he'd once told her, couldn't be repaid. Some connections couldn't be severed. And sometimes the person who answered your call in the darkest moment wasn't who you expected. But they were exactly who you needed. The city kept turning, indifferent to their story. But for 2 people who'd found each other in crisis and stayed together through chaos, everything had changed. Not into something easier, but into something real. And in a world built on lies and careful compromises, real was the most dangerous thing of all.